Well, Mr. Secretary General, thank you for your leadership throughout and for this forum. And as I said at my first NATO defense ministerial last February, and as the Trump administration has said again and again in the last year and a half, our allies must step up. President Trump has been very clear on this point for many years and over 2 administrations. And for too long, NATO has been a paper tiger and a one-way street. No more. And that's what the Hague Summit is all about. That's what defense spending commitments are all about, transforming NATO back into a real military alliance that's focused on hard power and real deterrence, a NATO 3.0, modeled on the NATO 1.0 that won the Cold War, with our allies actually taking the lead in Europe's conventional defense. And that's what NATO was always supposed to be and what its framers like President Eisenhower always expected. Europe was not supposed to be a dependency of the United States. That's not what Winston Churchill or Charles de Gaulle or Konrad Adenauer wanted or expected. No, Europe was supposed to be a military power allied with a strong America. This is the essence of NATO 1.0. As Dwight Eisenhower himself said as early as 1951, if in 10 years, all American troops stationed in Europe for national defense purposes have not been returned to the United States, then this whole process will have failed. Eisenhower was Supreme Allied Commander then, not yet our nation's 34th president. But he and his Allied counterparts, all of them still living in the shadow of World War II, understood that NATO's power did not come from committees or from meetings or from small flags on fancy tables. It came from warriors. And for Europe's defense, it had come from NATO allies. That was NATO 1.0, a hard-edged warfighting organization focused on Europe's defense. But that spirit faded after the Cold War ended. No longer focused on defending Europe, NATO 2.0 drifted toward out-of-area operations and things that had nothing to do with warfighting at all. Instead of tanks and fighters and air defenses, the focus has been on gender equity and climate change and defense austerity. Europe's borders flew wide open. Welfare states expanded. Defense budgets cratered, along with Europe's belief in itself and its civilization. NATO lost its way. NATO 2.0 was an era of distraction, deindustrialization, and demilitarization. It was an era of free riding. And those were lost years that we're not going back to. And that's why at the Department of War, we've been so clear and so candid to restore NATO's core military role and character. And that's why we've returned U.S. troop levels in Europe to pre-2022 levels with the redeployment of a brigade combat team last year and further reduction of 5,000 forces earlier this year. At the same time, it's why we've engaged with our allies so consistently. And it's why we've grown our own defense industrial base and encouraged to turn NATO 3.0 into reality, to return the alliance to its roots as a military alliance and ensure that it has the European strength required to sustainably deter aggression and, if need be, make good on Article 5. Some of our allies have gotten the message and stepped up. You know who you are, and we very much appreciate it. Last year, under President Trump's leadership, NATO set the new global standard for allied defense spending, 5% of GDP, all in on defense. It's historic and it's transformational. And some allies are already well on their way to meeting this ambitious target, and in some cases ahead of schedule. And as you've seen over the last 6 months, President Trump is also committed to the United States defense spending, more than $1 trillion in 2026 and a commitment of $1.5 trillion in 2027. We will lead and exceed our own NATO spending standards. And I'm personally on Capitol Hill in order to make sure we do it. It's not do as I say, it's do as we do. Some allies are also getting serious about how they're spending on their defense. In May, the Department of War told allies that we're reducing our contributions to the NATO force model. We also explained how allies can and should backfill those changes. General Brinkowitz reports that some allies have stepped up accordingly, and it's a good start. At the same time, just last month, a small group of strong allies gathered at Bergen for a conversation about focused allied defense spending on the capabilities required to defend Europe even in the event of simultaneous conflicts worldwide. Again, more serious progress. On Ukraine as well, progress. Through President Trump's Pearl Initiative, allies have taken the lead in funding support for Ukraine's defense. The Ukrainians are holding their lines even in the face of sustained Russian assaults. We said it could be done, that our allies could lead, and that it would be consistent with Ukraine's defense. It is happening. And it's a validation of President Trump's approach, an approach that will set the table for peace. Yet for all these early steps in the right direction, there have also been real setbacks that we cannot ignore. For all of our clarity, too many allied capitals seem to still miss something in translation. Too many allies still don't recognize the historic need that President Trump has made clear to them and to NATO itself to reforge a relevant, powerful military alliance. As President Trump put it, and rightfully so, he gave our allies a test to support America when we asked for their help, and too many failed it. The United States has defended Europe for generations. And the president said, all he said was that our jets would need to take off from bases in Europe or our ships from ports to strike targets in the Middle East. Iranian targets that threaten European interests even more directly than they threaten us. But too many of our allies said no, or tried to drown us in arcane legal debates, or criticized us publicly for doing what they aren't prepared or able to do themselves. It was shameful. These allies, they put America's sons and daughters, our sons and daughters, at risk by denying them the predictable access, basing, and overflight that never should have been in question at all. In some cases, we had to shift capabilities from one country to another out of NATO allied countries altogether. There's no excuse for that. And that's not to mention the fact that some countries have yet to show a credible path to meeting their Hague commitments. Too much talk. Some of NATO's largest economies, some of our richest countries, allies that are happiest to go on about the rules-based international order and middle powers banding together still seem to think the era of free riding is here. Eisenhower and Trump disagree. This isn't what the president or America expects from this alliance. This is not what any reasonable person would expect. And it's not going to cut it anymore. And so we're doubling down on our effort to make NATO what it always was supposed to be, a balanced alliance with Europe in the lead for its own defense, NATO 3.0. And to make that a reality, I'm announcing today a 6-month Department of War review that will examine America's force posture and basing in Europe. Up to 6 months, could be less. Let's call it the NATO 3.0 review. This review will be conducted with the benefit of inputs from the United States military, from European Command. It will involve consultations with the U.S. Congress and with our allies. But make no mistake about it, this will be a real review. It will be designed to ensure that NATO is moving fast and irreversibly toward Europe leading, stepping up to take primary responsibility for the defense of Europe, stepping up to ensure our forces are postured for America's global needs, and stepping up to make sure that our access, basing, and overflight are clearly delineated and assured. Any other country would do the same. At the same time, going forward, our annual NATO dues will be contingent on other countries meeting their defense spending targets. Where other allies do not spend with urgency, our dues contributions will go down. NATO will be a two-way street. It's only common sense. America cannot care for or pay more for Europe's defense than our allies do. And this review will think outside the box. Our national defense strategy states clearly that we're going to incentivize and enable our allies to step up and do their part. So we're going to keep a close eye on allies who are not doing that and who say no, or maybe, or wait and see when it matters most. It's a review that some countries will fail and others will pass with flying colors. In the end, the review is intended to both improve U.S. force posture and basing and strengthen NATO 3.0. It's intended to be constructive, as we have always been. There are no strategic surprises here. There haven't been. I've been clear with all of you since my first remarks to this body in February of 2025. President Trump has always done the same. Our direction of travel is and has been clear. This is the right thing to do by the American people. It's the right thing to do by this alliance. Europe can and must take primary responsibility for its conventional defense as it pledged at the Hague summit. And in the process, safeguarding Europe's defense for generations to come. We know our allies can do it, and it's time. Thank you.
How are we doing? Thank you for coming along. First of all, I think our message is clear. It's been consistent for a year and a half. For President Trump, it's been consistent for two administrations. NATO's got to step up to be a real military alliance. America's done its part for a very long time. NATO 3.0 is all about looking at our friends, being honest, saying you've got to step up and spend more on your defense. Get to that commitment of 5%. President Trump at the Hague summit demanded it. Now we're going to be in Ankara in a couple of weeks where he's going to have a chance to hear these countries how much progress they've made. And that's been consistent across the board. And I was honest also that at the outset of Epic Fury, there were some allies that didn't provide the kind of support they should have. And we're honest in public. We're honest in private about it. We need to be able to ensure we have access, basing, and overflight when it matters in the middle of a contingency. And so the review that we're undertaking, the NATO 3.0 review, is simply that. Where is the right place for basing? Where can we make sure we have access and overflight when we need it, so that America's properly postured on the continent and around the world? It's an earnest review that we look forward to undertaking, working with Congress, working with our allies, working with General Brinkowitz, the commander of European Command, who's fantastic, and our policy shop, and we'll get to work on it right away. So thanks for coming along, and we look forward to getting back to Washington. Couple quick questions.
Yes. Secretary Hegseth, it appears there's unprecedented cooperation from NATO leadership today. But what about the countries that have been lagging in the overfly and all the other issues? Do you think they felt the impact of today?
I know they felt the impact. We were clear, publicly and privately. We're not going to allow freeloading anymore. Excuses don't count anymore. Our dues, our NATO dues, are contingent upon other countries stepping up. This is not a one-way street. And so this is not as if this is a new message from President Trump or from me. And that's why most countries are responding positively, both publicly and behind closed doors. It was great to hear country after country say, we're going to meet our target. We're going to meet our target. There are still a few outliers, and we will be clear with them. And as we do this review, we'll change how we look at the continent as a result. Any other questions?
Regarding the international effort to demine the Strait of Hormuz, was that discussed today? And have they given any kind of an idea of a time frame of what they can bring in and the time frame for getting it back up to pre-conflict traffic levels?
There are European countries prepared to step up, and we welcome that. Obviously, any mines that are there need to be identified and removed, and Iran should be fully compliant, cooperative in that sense. But it's an international waterway. And frankly, European countries and Asian countries use it a lot more than we do. We've got energy independence and resources in our hemisphere that are bountiful and will change I think the energy architecture for a generation. So the European countries ought to be at the front. There are a number that have stepped up, and we welcome that. And they'll do it in coordination with CENTCOM and Admiral Cooper to make sure that that waterway is open and commerce is moving as the president intended right away.
Secretary Hicks said the agreement with Iran calls for the withdrawal of U.S. forces from the areas around Iran. Can you explain to us what that really means in practical terms? And could you address your thoughts about the agreement and critics in Israel and elsewhere who say that it's giving too much to Iran?
I would say one key difference you got to point out between this agreement and others is this was born of strength, of American action. JCPOA came from a bunch of begging and talking. This agreement came after months of bombing and a blockade that was impenetrable. Iran was put in a position where they had to come to the table and undertake this. And what President Trump has been clear about from the beginning, and the War Department is clear about, is Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Full stop, cannot have a nuclear weapon. Everybody knows it. And so our military actions and any negotiations will be centered on that. And the president has pointed out that we will be prepared to recommence if underneath the timeline of these talks, Iran does not do what it says it's going to do, just give up nuclear weapons, give up nuclear ambitions, give away their nuclear material, close nuclear facilities, then the War Department is here and prepared to restart if we need to. We prefer not to, but we are prepared and postured to. When it comes to our alignment or posture in the region, we'll review what capabilities we need. You know, when the blockade opens fully, we'll step back and allow commerce to flow. But if Iran doesn't comply, then we're more than able to reimpose an ironclad blockade. We've had basing in that region for a long time. A lot of that will stay just as it is. And we'll look at how many troops we need in the area and calibrate accordingly. But we're going to be the big stick behind the negotiations that never existed under President Obama. It just didn't. It was a paper tiger hoping that they agree. We have put a military operation in place that set the conditions, not to mention President Trump killing Qasem Soleimani, not to mention Midnight Hammer, not to mention not just the offensive operations of Epic Fury, but the blockade, which they haven't been able to have any answer for, and Project Freedom, which ran hundreds of millions of barrels of oil through. We have set the terms. And so our military posture will continue to ensure Iran does the right thing at the table with this deal. And the belief is that from this MOU going forward, they will have every opportunity to do just that to ensure Iran never has a nuclear weapon.
Mr. Secretary,
yes.
How was the meeting with your UK counterpart, and what did you make his predecessor's resignation?
It was a good meeting with the new counterpart at the UK. Obviously the US, British, Defense Alliance is an important one. My message to him was he's actually a fellow service member, just a couple of majors getting together, talking about defense of their nation. I love the fact that he's been in the combat zone. We talked about the similarities we have there, but the message was the same. Hey, we need you guys to step up and do even more, spend even more. And if we need access and basing, whether it's in the UK or say at Diego Garcia, we can't live in a world where other countries are standing at the end of a runway with a clipboard trying to decide what flies and what doesn't. It's not going to work for us. It's not good in contingencies. And I don't think it's what he wants either. So at the Minister of Defense level, I think it's the start of a continued really good relationship. The more the UK spends on defense, the stronger NATO is going to be, the stronger Western civilization is. And that's a good thing. So I think a good start to a relationship that we need to renew even more. Last question, real quick. Yes.
On the forced posture change, how quickly do you think that we'll see a tangible change of the U.S. presence in the Middle East?
It's all conditions based. It's all based, again, on the responsiveness and benchmarks met and things that, and just like this talk about resources and money, it's based on performance. Everything is based on performance. This is not a trust and don't verify like the Obama deal. There's not a lot of trust here, and everything we're going to do is verify, verify, verify. And so at every step, whether it's our military posture or it's the carrots that exist to ensure Iran never has a nuclear weapon, all performance based. There's no giveaways here. There's no trust here. It's all verification. And the War Department stands behind it all, as the president has said, prepared to devastatingly do what we've done already. Iran's never seen the kind of military campaign that the United States launched on them, full stop. Regardless of what the American media wants to say, peddling Iranian state television, Iran's been devastated militarily by, on so many fronts by these strikes, which brought them to this position, not to mention a blockade they can't do anything about because they don't have a conventional navy. And then we were willing to restrike a couple of nights, which again set them back even more in the Strait of Hormuz, showing that we will restart if we have to. So our posture is one of strength. Iran's going to have every opportunity to cut the kind of deal they should at the table. And if they don't, the War Department will be right here, ready to go. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. See you on the plane.